The video you're about to watch contains visuals of gore, body horror, bodily fluids, and flashing lights. Viewer discretion is advised.
I think that saying I'm a nostalgic person would be one of the most obvious statements I could make, behind only the sky being blue and Nintendo being the worst thing to happen to their own games. Because of my love of nostalgia, I'm able to mine it for my own videos because I don't need to take notes nor do research to be able to convey what it was I felt when revisiting a game from my past. However, I think allowing nostalgia to blind me to the wonderful games we get today would be folly and honestly kind of foolish, and that is why I think it is fitting to talk about a modern game that I wish I had as a kid. Infernax is a game that I feel embodies the best of the video game indie scene. It avoids the many pitfalls that retro-styled indie games find themselves in, such as justifying laziness or incompetence as being retro, and instead brings the scrappy attitude of the medium's early days and merges it with the more hardcore philosophies of modern gaming. This game is brutal in both gameplay and aesthetics. This crusading romp against demonic forces wears its retro influences on its sleeve while being unafraid to criticize some of its more ludicrous aspects. I hope to bring this game to your attention as I feel anybody who likes what they see so far needs to play it. So without further ado, I'm the Phantom Merchant and I'd like to welcome you to my shop. This game was developed by Berserk Studio and published by the Arcade Crew, who also published Blazing Chrome. That is a game that I will no doubt be speaking about in the future, of that I can assure you. You start the game by naming your save file, and since the character's name defaults to Alcidor, I'm going to leave it that because, well, I'm kind of boring, admittedly. You are then introduced to the main character, Alcidor, the Duke of Upel, as he returns from a violent crusade in the Holy Land. It is then revealed that a year prior, somebody else from the Holy Land had made it to Upel with an evil tome of immense power. This is portrayed by a rather nice homage to old arcade and NES style cinematics that utilize a lot of well-made pixel art. The game then switches to a side-scrolling 8-bit perspective as the good Duke comes by boat onto the shores of Upel. You walk up to find a group of crows having a community chow down on a corpse nailed to a cross before said corpse falls to the ground and comes back to life as a zombie. This is your first enemy and really underlines how unrelentingly brutal this game is with its aesthetic. After you give your new undead friend the old Frankish headbutt, you make your way left through more zombies and weird bugs. Once you get past this undead welcoming committee, you find yourself in the company of an ailing man who begs you to kill him. This is the first in a long line of moral choices that you can make all throughout the game. For this playthrough, I decided to go down the good route. If you wish to see me go down the evil route, I will be streaming it on YouTube after this video is finished. Since I tried to help the man, it turned out to be too late for him and he turned into a rather phallic looking flesh spider. Not gonna lie, the design is pretty damn sick. After I administer the time-tested homeopathic remedy of mace to the face, a woman who had witnessed what I had done runs off. I make my way left through some flesh-eating zombies and floating eyes before finally arriving at Darsov Castle, the home fortress of the good Duke. It's under attack by the undead, but with my help, we are able to send them back to hell where they belong. The garrison, happy to see their liege back, open the gates and allow me into the castle. The brief moment of respite is interrupted by an unwanted guest, a hideously deformed monster with a massive butcher's cleaver. I politely ask him to leave in the only language that I know, and he here I am introduced to Father Henry, the religious leader of the realm and guide to the good Duke. He has me rest until the next day and tells me to take as much time as I need to rest before leaving me to my own devices. From here, I decide to meet some of the peasants in the castle and get asked by an old crone to take care of a skeleton that has been disturbing the grave of her grandfather. Deciding it might be a good idea to get some XP and some gold before taking care of the big bad, I oblige and make my way east. I'd like to take this time to highlight the fact that this is less of a traditional Metroidvania where you are in a labyrinth and are forced to traverse it, though that is what it appears to be on the surface, and instead is more of an open world adventure game with some RPG-like mechanics similar to the pre-Breath of the Wild Zelda games, with the biggest key difference being the ability to farm experience and using it to level up at one of the saved shrines. I actually like this because I've always preferred that style of adventure RPG where your reward for getting better in a challenging game is making yourself more powerful and thus making the game, well, I suppose easier is the wrong word to use, but making your character at least able to keep up in terms of power with his foes. Throw in some of the spells and abilities you're able to pick up throughout the game and you've got what I'd like to call an earned power fantasy. So I find the skeleton who's trying to make friends with a dead guy and explain to him why grave robbing is pretty cringe, and go back to town to turn the quest in for a somewhat hefty payout. I take on more side quests and head off to go hunt down the beast from earlier with trails of purple blood giving hints to where it went. Along the way, I complete the other side quests, but I won't show those because I don't want to spoil too much. When I arrive at the Citadel where the rotund butcher is, we engage in glorious combat in another boss battle, and I think this might be my biggest criticism of the game. The boss battles are a bit too easy for my taste. They usually have one, maybe two easily dodged attacks, and even some of the more varied bosses later are still far too easy for my taste. Do I think these boss battles are bad? Not really, but I don't think they really fulfill the role of a video game boss, and that is just being a test of your acquired skills and abilities. I will explain this more in the next section, but it's something that I noticed to be revealed pretty quickly. After turning the butcher into a featureless pile of gore, Father Henry reveals to me the source of the troubles that ail up hell, a massive fortress known as Urzon Citadel. The citadel itself is sealed by a magical lock that houses a pentacle with each of the points being a different colored orb. These 5 orbs are found within the game's 5 dungeons, also known as castles, and Father Henry hands me the key to the first dungeon. At this point, I am just under an hour into the game, and I can say wholeheartedly that it leaves an excellent first impression. You have a dark, gritty world that on one hand isn't too tongue-in-cheek, but doesn't take itself too seriously either. In fact, there's actually a bit that makes fun of the wall chicken in Castlevania games, which I find pretty humorous. It's able to strike a nice balance that only so many games are able to achieve. The combat is very crunchy. Whacking enemies with your mace feels, well, fun as hell, and watching them turn into chunks of flesh fires off neurons in my monkey brain. There are numerous times within the 10 hours of time that I spent playing this game that I thought, I think I have enough footage. This game is fucking awesome. I'm gonna go write this script right now. But then I'd play more, and I couldn't get it out of my head, but something felt missing. I mentioned it briefly a few paragraphs ago, but I think it's time to delve into this game's barrier that keeps it from being perfect in my eyes. So here's a fun fact about me. One of my favorite aspects of any form of action game is the idea of boss fights. From run and gun shooters to platformers and of course Metroidvanias. I mean, Monster Hunter is one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time because it has some of the best boss fights in gaming. But why do I love boss fights so much? Sometimes they serve as a metaphorical gate to more content or a checkpoint in the story. Other times it feels like a test of my reflexes and timing. Those are all good, but the thing that turns a good boss fight into an absolute classic is when it forces you to utilize a mixture of your own knowledge of the game, as well as any items or abilities you have acquired so far to go against a strong opponent that puts all of that to the test. And Infernax's bosses don't do that. I'm not going to be going into story spoilers here, but I will be talking about a somewhat later dungeon, Stormheim Castle. This place is cool as hell. It has a watery aesthetic, which has always been my shit. You're always on your toes because you have to walk over the water and you're probably going to be ambushed by these weird fish gremlin things. This really puts your platforming skills to the test as you use expert timing to close gaps, traverse water wheels, and dodge spears. Once you get the skill within the dungeon, you make your way over to the boss, and it's a weird octopus-looking humanoid with a vagina eye in its stomach. I mean, it's a cool design, but the fight is not much. You just move back and forth on the platform, dodge fire attacks, duck a beam from his eye, and jump over these tentacles. Then you jump and thwack your mace into his eye until the game tells you to stop. And you know what? This is perhaps my favorite boss fight in the game because it at least has some basic mechanics. Would you have guessed that this was the dungeon that you get the upward strike, this game's version of a double jump? I don't think I would have because honestly, I didn't even use it once in this boss fight. In fact, I had to rewatch my footage just to make sure this was the dungeon you got that skill from. The way you get into the castle is via a hint from an NPC to use a skill that you'd gotten previously to summon the castle from the sea, something that took me a while to realize and made me feel smart when I did. So why is this boss fight not using the same philosophy? Hell, even just having him float above the platform and forcing you to use the upward strike would be something. Needless to say, the boss fights before and the boss fights after just feel so brain dead. Just use a healing potion or healing spell when you need to, and then whack the weak spot with your mace until they fall down, occasionally dunking and jumping when needed. You could argue that's what all boss fights are, but usually they have a few more steps to them, or at least they're able to maintain an illusion that they're more than that. Full disclosure, I only beat it via the good ending, not the two evil endings or the ultimate good ending, so maybe there are some bosses I simply just didn't find, but what I did see fits the mold that I described. In fact, I'm gonna go into some of these side quest bosses actually. One of them is a necromancer of some kind that just keeps throwing zombies at you in waves, and your only strategy is getting to him before he disappears and hitting him. Another side quest boss has you playing a spicy baseball game in a fight that is somehow even less engaging than the actual sport. In fact, that seems to be the closest thing that some of these bosses have to mechanics. They either throw enemies at you that are more annoying than challenging, or they have some type of timing-based deflection, but it's still not engaging enough for my sake at least. And it's unfortunate because in every other regard, this game ranges from good to top tier. In fact, if you worked on this game and you're watching this video, I hope to reiterate that I think Infernax is actually extremely brilliant, and I think the best way to explain that would be in its own section. I wish I had this game as a kid. Specifically, I wish I had Infernax around ages 14 to 16, because I feel like I would have just vibed with it really well back then in so many regards. For example, I love knightly aesthetics. The idea of playing as a powerful crusader, smiting down the undead and floating eyeballs with a mace is so fucking cool. In fact, there's so much about this game's overall visual and even audio aesthetic that I love so much. The chiptune music really does evoke the NES style of adventure game in a way that still manages to be identifiable after a decade of saturation within that genre of music. Here are a few examples of those songs. Visually speaking, I have always had a love for gore in 2D games, and smacking around enemies into piles of guts has always been satisfying for me. Despite the gameplay issues, I think the visual design of the bosses are honestly fucking awesome as somebody who loves body horror. I even like how dying causes a cinematic showing Elsador being gruesomely murdered by whatever killed him in their own unique way, like a Cannibal Corpse directed version of a Crash Bandicoot game. While on the topic of heavy metal, I love how the achievements of this game are named after songs from various bands. Just a few examples, you have the aforementioned Cannibal Corpse, Slayer, Iron Maiden, my personal favorite Amon Amarth, and of course Killswitch Engage. That was a joke. That was a joke! From a purely aesthetic perspective, I can tell that this game embodies pretty much everything about me in my early to mid-teens. This game feels like it was made by that battle jacket wearing metalhead kid from the 1980s who spent most of their time playing Castlevania and Zelda 2 in his mom's basement and always made sure to tell you how cool Iron Maiden and Slayer were. I know that because, well, I was that kid. Just replace the 80s with the early 2010s, replace Castlevania and Zelda 2 with Mountain Blade and Terraria, and replace Iron Maiden and Slayer with Amon Amarth and Hammerfall. At the risk of sounding like I need to get a prostate exam tomorrow, this game reminds me of my teenage years, and it makes me yearn for them in a way that I rarely do. Outside of aesthetics, the gameplay loop of exploring the world, killing bad guys, finding skills and spells, and using them to be able to explore the world more is a feature of all Metroidvanias and Zelda-likes that I have always enjoyed, and that is no exception here. There are genuinely so many good things here that my issues with the boss fights really are the only problems I can think of. Some of the platforming can be a bit off, and I don't like how clunky some of the movement skills are, but at this point I feel like these are just nitpicks. It's a great game, and if there is DLC or a sequel, you can bet your ass that I'm gonna pick it up. Another fucking video in the bag in just over a week. Hey, I can be consistent when I want to be. Anyway, I want to give a massive shout out to my friend Summer Sorceress. This amazing person was willing to go out of her way to record the disclaimer at the very beginning, and I want to give her as much credit as possible. Go check out her channel. Go check out her Twitch streams. Just go check her out. She is a fantastic human being, and I will have all of her stuff linked in the description below. I also want to announce that I am going to be doing more streams on YouTube. Specifically, I'm going to be streaming Infernax after this video is released, and we're going to be doing the Evil Run, because that's always fun. Another announcement that I want to make, I actually started a Patreon, but the reason why I started it is because I want a little extra money to buy takeout. So if I ever start making money on the Patreon, at the end of every video, I'm going to show off a thing that I ordered with the takeout money at the end of every video, so that'll be fun. Lastly, and this is most importantly in my mind because I just love this kind of interaction, we're going to get started on the Q&A. As always, if you want to check out and join the Q&A session, just follow me on Twitter, where you can also lose hundreds of brain cells, and I will post about a Q&A session that you can reply to, and maybe your question will be answered in the next video. The first question comes from my friend Peanut. Do you think the next Monster Hunter will have Palamutes? Alright, so I don't know, because very likely the next Monster Hunter will be developed by the main team, and I'm not entirely sure if they're in love with the idea of mounting. They did actually start the whole mounting process with Iceborne, so it's possible. I could see it. Honestly, I could easily see it, because as Monster Hunter has entered the 5th generation, and I assume the 6th generation, higher mobility or greater mobility has been a bigger feature, so I could easily see it. It wouldn't surprise me. Would it be Palamutes though? I'm not sure. If not, then something will replace them. The next one comes from my friend Chromatizer. Great moments with video games you've played. Oh God, that's such a good question. Honestly, if we're talking recently, I would probably have to say playing through the emulated version of Super Mario Sunshine again for my first video. That's why that video is kind of sentimental to me. It really I mean, aside from the fact that it's my first video on this channel, it's just really nice. If we're talking a more legacy style of great moment, I would probably have to say when I was a kid in about kindergarten and first grade, I had a friend who would play Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on my N64 because I wasn't very good at it and I needed help. And I would just sit there and watch him. And that kind of means a lot to me. It meant a lot to me then, but it means a lot to me more now because that person has since passed away. So yeah, that'd probably be one. Maybe playing a lot of Oblivion in the summer of 2008. That would also be a really great moment for me. And the last one comes from a longtime friend, the Magpie Boss. What is your least and most favorite ramen? I can't pick a least favorite because it takes a lot for ramen to be bad in my eyes, but my favorite type of ramen would probably be this type of ramen that my friend Christy showed me from this Asian food website that you can order from. I got some amazing ramen. I'm probably gonna have a few pictures up so that way you can see it. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much to everybody who showed up, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.